Part 5 of the WCG Era Series, we take a look back at the Season 5 Test Series between Brendan's 11 and Rabih's 11, as D-Day had arrived for the men in red as they laid this one all on the line. A solitary test match would decide this year's series, with some fresh faces and some familiar ones returning home. This test match would go down in history as a line in the sand moment, as the Rabih's 11 experiment would be consigned to the dustbin of history. This is the story of the Season 5 Test Series, Brendan's 11 taking on Rabih's 11, the final nail in the coffin. It was a historic start for the WCG to begin Season 5. The New Zealand Blackyards had arrived on Aussie shores to contest the first ever Trans-Tasman Backyard Cricket Series. A series that would go back and forth, but ultimately it would be the Aussies who would prove too strong, claiming a nail-biting 15-14 series victory. And with the completion of that series, it was time to return to domestic action at the WCG. And next up, a standalone test between Brendan's 11 and Rabih's 11, with the Blues looking to continue their dominance after a whitewash series victory the previous season. However, the Reds did win their last meeting between these two sides, prevailing in the limited overs fixture to claim their first title, which led to this bold claim from the Red skipper.
Power brokers will back me for next year to take you on and fucking dethrone you of the test series.
Rabih would double down and provided an even bigger revelation when asked what he'd do if he lost again.
I'll happily stand down.
So you should. You should stand down now, but
I will
give
stand
you one
down.
last chance.
So with a historic outcome either way, it was time to get this show on the road. Pleasantries at the toss, and sadly an all too familiar result for the Red skipper.
I can't fucking win a toss.
We'll have a bat, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go, boys.
So the Blues won a fourth consecutive test match toss, and they elected to bat first. And the big story for the Blues, George Pineros returned to the Brendan's 11 lineup after an unsuccessful stint with Rabih's 11 in the previous season. Mark Pasterfield, the man omitted from the squad. And as for Rabih's 11, Jake Kasatia and Adam Hughes would make their full WCG debuts in this do-or-die fixture, as it would be a test match debut for Daniel Arnold, which would strengthen the Reds' batting. So it was time for a new battle between somewhat familiar foes, and it was a familiar story early on as the Blues skipper would get off to another flyer. In what must have felt like Groundhog Day for the men in red, Scott would start the series strongly again to get the Blues off and racing at the top of the order. A largely inexperienced bowling attack for the Reds was being comprehensively put to the sword as Scott picked up where he left off in last year's Test Series. Even the Reds' pace spearheads were going the journey as Scott was motoring to another half century. Scott would eventually bring up that half century with a pull shot to Michael Johnson, and the alarm bells were sounding for the men in red. However, Scott's innings was brought to an end with the very next delivery. A much needed wicket for the Reds as Scott's innings was brought to an end on 52. That would trigger an all too familiar collapse for the men in blue. Daniel Hancock, promoted to 2, had to go for 4. And when El Basher fell for another duck in a test match at the WCG, the Blues, who were at one stage no wicket for 54, were now 3 for 59. Matt White's stay at the crease was brief, nicking off to Michael Johnson for 4. And Gavin Merrifield would perish for the same score, clean bowled by Daniel Arnold, who picked up his first test wicket at the WCG, as the Blues had lost 5 for 13. That would officially bring about George Pineros' return to the Blues, and he would set about making the Reds pay, as he would begin to get the Blues' first innings back on track. Pineros was in a typically aggressive mood as he took the fight back to the Reds' attack to move the Blues towards 3 figures. It was going to take something special to end the Pineros innings, and young Nathan Hancock produced just that with a beautiful swinging delivery which went right through Pineros to end his innings on 22. And when Stepien was knocked over by Ryan Schaefer for a duck, the Blues' first innings had come to an end. So it was a familiar story for the Blues in their first innings. After a strong start from the skipper at the top of the order, the innings fell away. They would lose 8 for 36 to be bowled out for 90 in their first innings, as it was now time for the Reds' response. And it was yet another familiar story for the Reds at the top of the order. Michael Johnson in the firing line this season, with his first innings at the top of the order yielding 0. Young Nathan Hancock would also perish for a duck. After being tied down, he would set off for a suicidal single. And the Reds' nightmare at the top of the order continued as they slumped to 2 for 4. Justin Brooks' horror season with the bat continued, clean bowled by a brilliant in-swinging Yorker from George Pineros, as he went for yet another Rabih's 11 duck. And make that 4 ducks in a row, debutant Adam Hughes clean bowled by Hamid al-Basha, and the Reds had slumped to 4 for 4. That would bring another debutant to the crease, Jake Kasacha, and in what would prove to be a first glimpse into his batting mentality, he sought about trying to hit Rabih's 11 out of the hole they were in. He would go after Gavin Merrifield in particular, hitting him for 2 consecutive boundaries before he went for 1 big shot too many. Kasacha's whirlwind innings of 18 coming to an end. That would bring the Test debutant to the crease, Daniel Arnold, who began his innings positively before Alex Stepien produced another bullet. Arnold gone for 4, and the Reds' first innings was in tatters at 6 for 26. That would bring the Red skipper to the crease, who himself would get off the mark with a boundary until a brain snap to his former player. al-Basha failing to offer a stroke to be trapped dead in front, and the Reds were reeling at 7 for 31. That would bring Ryan Schaefer, the last man to the crease for the Reds, and he again got off the mark in typical fashion before suffering a brain explosion of his own. al-Basha's delivery just clipping the leg stump, and the Rabih's 11 first innings had come crashing down. So Rabih's 11 rolled for just 38 in their first innings, with only the debutant Jake Kasacha managing to reach double figures in what was a devastating looking batting card. That meant the Reds would cough up a 52-run lead to the Blues on first innings, and they were behind the 8-ball in a test match yet again. Scott dropped himself down the order once again, with al-Basha promoted to the top of the order, and his miserable time with the bat came to an end, registering a pair for the test match. Hancock would get himself off the mark in strong fashion, punching one down the ground to Michael Johnson. However, his innings would come to an end not long after, hitting a full toss over the fence to be dismissed cheaply in the test match once again, and the Blues had slumped to 2 for 6. Josh Bolling was the next man to the crease, and he would get his innings underway in positive fashion, getting a couple away to the boundary to move his way to 9 before he himself had a brain fade. Bolling completely misjudging the line from the Red skipper, and he was the third man to go with the score on 17. It was a similar story too for Matt White. He would get his innings underway in positive fashion, as too did Bolling, getting a couple away to the boundary. However, he was dismissed in soft fashion, getting an edge through to the keeper from the bowling of Jake Kasacha, who was having a pretty decent match on debut, and White had to go for 9. That would bring that man again, George Pineros, to the crease, and he once again set about the rescue mission for the Blues as he pushed the Blues lead towards the 100 mark. But he would become the 3rd consecutive batsman to be dismissed for 9 in the innings as he tickled one through to the keeper off the bowling of Michael Johnson. The Blues now 5 for 47, a lead of 99 runs. Every run was proving to be crucial for the Blues, and Alex Stepien would frustrate the Reds as he too would find the boundary on a couple of occasions before he was knocked over by the Red skipper for 8 and the Blues were 6 for 55. Gavin Merrifield would come to the crease and get one past the Red skipper to begin his innings, but he wouldn't add any further runs to his score as he was clean bowled by debutant Jake Kasacha for 6. So the Blues skipper made his way to the crease with a lead standing at 114, and he would go bang, 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 and bang in a whirlwind innings which would last barely 10 minutes but would push his side to a near unbeatable position. His innings wasn't without luck though. When the Reds thought they'd finally brought the innings to an end, luck intervened. Scott would bring up back-to-back half-centuries for the Test match in the same over, with the lead approaching 200. However, as he was in the first innings, dismissed with the very next delivery, and the Reds had finally ended the Blues innings. So the Blues dismissed for 118 in their second innings, led largely by their skipper once again, who finished 50, which meant it was going to be another record run chase required for the men in red if they were going to finally get their hands on this Test Series silverware. However, this was going to take something quite extraordinary. Jake Kasacha was promoted to the top of the order for the run chase, but he couldn't recreate his first innings heroics as he was smartly stumped by the Blues skipper, as Kasacha had to go for a duck and the Reds were 1 for 1. Nathan Hancock would bat for a full rotation before finally breaking the shackles, hitting a full toss from bowling to the boundary. But yet, another brain explosion in this Test match. Nathan Hancock misjudging, as did Ryan Schaefer in the first innings, and this one clipping the leg stump to the Blues' joy. And when Justin Brooke was dismissed for a pair in the Test match, to the Blues skipper picking up his first wicket of the contest, the Reds had slumped to 3 for 12, and all hope of a miracle had appeared lost. But that would bring Ryan Schaefer to the crease, and he would set about an innings which was about to change the entire trajectory of this contest, as he was at his fluent, aggressive best. Schaefer showed glimpses of his talent in the previous season, but it would all come together just when his side needed him the most to get the Reds back into this contest. The counter-attacking nature of the innings appeared to startle the defending champions, who simply had no answers to the Ryan Schaefer onslaught. However, after just surpassing 50, a moment of controversy, after failing to offer a stroke to a Brendan Scott delivery which kept a little low, the umpire gave him not out, with the replay suggesting it was very close indeed. Schaefer would dust himself off and continue the onslaught as he pushed the Reds beyond the 100 mark, and the deficit would continue to erode as he edged himself closer to his own milestone. However, on 90, disaster. The Blues finally picking up Schaefer's wicket, a timely intervention at that, and so came to an end one of the great WCG knocks, as the Blues could only pay homage. Adam Hughes' poor Test match came to an end in misery as he was dismissed for a pair for the Test match, and it appeared the Blues were back on track for victory. That would bring Daniel Arnold to the crease with 63 to get, and he was given a life on his very first delivery, and he would set about bit by bit chewing into the remainder of this deficit. That is until that man again, Gavin Merrifield, picked up another key breakthrough. Arnold gone for 15, 44 still required, 2 wickets in the shed. As the Red skipper walked out to the middle, could this be his crowning moment? He would begin his innings in positive fashion, slapping Daniel Hancock to the boundary. However, in an attempt to replicate that shot, was dismissed over the fence 2 balls later, and the Reds' hopes were all down to one more man. Michael Johnson made his way to the crease with 40 to get, and he too would begin his innings positively. However, the end was nigh. Matt White finally getting his reward for a brilliant bowling performance, picking up the final Reds wicket to send the Blues into delirium. So in a valiant effort with the bat in this run chase, it was ultimately not enough for the Reds, as they were bowled out for 136 in their second innings. Ryan Schaefer leading the way with one of the great knocks at the WCG of 90, but couldn't find any support. The Blues ultimately prevailed by 34 runs to seal a 1-0 series win, as they made it 4 straight against their new rivals. Brendan Scott was named man of the match once again. El Basher indeed fell on his sword, and the Blues became the first side to win 3 straight series.